Richard Caldwell adjusts his Rolex, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble plaza outside Meridian Tower. His midnight blue Bentley gleams under the Georgia Sunday. He reaches for the door handle when small fingers grip his sleeve. A black girl, no older than 9, stares up with desperate eyes. Her clothes are worn but clean, her backpack patched with duct tape. "Please," she whispers, holding up a crumpled envelope. "They lied about my mama." The document header reads, "Meridian Financial Services. Application denied." His blood runs cold. Richard freezes, staring at the envelope bearing his company's logo, the familiar blue and silver design he approved 3 years ago, suddenly feeling foreign and threatening in this child's trembling hands. The Atlanta heat presses down on them both, but he barely notices as Amara begins to explain in a voice that wavers between childhood innocence and forced maturity beyond her years. Her mother, Shanice, applied for emergency housing assistance through Meridian's community aid program 3 weeks ago. She tells him, her words tumbling out in a rehearsed rush, as if she's afraid he'll walk away before she finishes. The program, which Richard personally announced at a press conference back in March, standing before cameras and promising to help low-income families access the resources they desperately needed, was supposed to be his legacy project. The thing that proved business could have a conscience. Amara shows him the rejection letter, her small fingers smoothing the creases, and he reads the cold, bureaucratic language. Application incomplete, missing documentation. But then she pulls out a thick folder from her worn backpack, and Richard's world tilts as she spreads the contents before him on the hood of his Bentley. Every single document is there, properly filled out in careful handwriting, notarized with official stamps, dated and organized in plastic sleeves. There are pay stubs from her mother's previous job at a packaging plant, tax returns going back 3 years, utility bills, a lease agreement, bank statements, references from employers and a pastor, medical records, even a letter from Amara's school principal. The folder is more organized than most board presentations Richard receives. She shows him receipts, proving the application was hand-delivered to Meridian's downtown office on the morning of October 3rd, and signed for by a Meridian employee named Kyle Henderson at 9:47 in the morning. Richard recognizes the name immediately, because Henderson works in community outreach, personally vetted by Richard himself during the hiring process 6 months ago, a young man with an impressive resume from Duke University and a smile that seemed genuine. Amara's voice cracks as she explains what brought her here today, her composure finally breaking. Her mother lost her job at the packaging plant when the facility automated their operations, laying off 200 workers with 2 weeks severance. They're being evicted in 5 days because Shanice can't make rent, and the community aid program was supposed to be their lifeline, the thing that would bridge them to stability. Richard's discomfort grows as people walk past on the plaza, some staring openly at the strange tableau of a wealthy white executive and a desperate black child, others deliberately looking away, as if pretending not to see will absolve them of any responsibility to care. He notices his driver Marcus, a dignified black man in his 50s who's worked for Richard for 8 years, watching through the Bentley's windshield with an unreadable expression that Richard suddenly realizes he's seen before but never understood, a look that contains layers of meaning Richard has been too comfortable to decode. The climactic twist arrives when Amara reveals something that makes Richard's stomach drop and his carefully constructed world crack. Her mother's application was flagged with a code, she says, showing him a printed email she somehow obtained. The code reads, Category R7. Richard stares at those characters, his mind racing through every meeting, every policy document, every system overview he's reviewed in his 4 years as CEO of Meridian Financial Services. He has never heard of Category R7 in his own company. He's memorized their coding systems, their risk assessment categories, their processing protocols. This designation doesn't exist in any official documentation he's ever seen. Richard tells Amara to wait, trying to project confidence and authority, promising he'll look into this immediately and make it right. She grabs his arm with surprising strength for such a small child, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that makes him profoundly uncomfortable. "That's what the lady on the phone said too," she whispers. "2 weeks ago. Mama's too scared to come herself. She thinks they're watching her." The paranoia in that statement should sound absurd, the delusion of someone looking for external explanations for personal failures, but something in Amara's eyes tells Richard this isn't paranoia at all. Richard assures her with words that sound hollow even to his own ears that he'll call her mother tonight, that he'll fix this, that everything will be okay. He climbs into his Bentley, the leather seats suddenly feeling obscene in their luxury, and Marcus pulls smoothly into Atlanta traffic without a word. As they drive away, Richard sees Amara in the side mirror, standing alone on the plaza with her folder clutched to her chest, her small figure growing smaller and smaller until she disappears into the crowd. And he cannot shake the feeling that he's just been shown something true about his company, about his city, about himself that he can never unsee. In his corner office on the 42nd floor of Meridian Tower, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a panoramic view of Atlanta's glittering skyline, Richard immediately abandons the stack of contracts awaiting his signature and searches the company database for category R7. His fingers move quickly across the keyboard, accessing systems with his executive credentials that should give him visibility into every process, every code, every operational detail of the company he supposedly runs. Nothing appears in any official system. He tries variations, searching for R7, category R, just the number 7 in various contexts, checking archived files, historical records, even the help documentation that explains every other designation Meridian uses. The code simply doesn't exist, or more accurately, it exists somewhere he cannot access, which is impossible because he's the chief executive officer. He calls Kyle Henderson to his office, using the intercom to keep his voice level and professional, giving no indication of the growing dread in his chest. Henderson arrives within minutes, a polished white man in his early 30s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost $2,000, his smile confident and easy as he settles into the chair across from Richard's desk. Richard asks about Shanice Johnson's application, watching Henderson's face carefully, and what he sees there chills him. Henderson's expression barely changes, maintaining that professional courtesy that expensive business schools teach, but Richard catches a micro-expression, just a flash lasting maybe half a second, something cold and calculating that flickers behind the pleasant mask before vanishing. Henderson pulls up records on his tablet with practiced efficiency, his fingers swiping through screens, and nods with what appears to be genuine regret. "Ah, yes, the Johnson application. Incomplete submission, unfortunately. We notified the applicant multiple times about the missing documentation. It's a shame, really, but we have to maintain standards, or the entire program loses integrity." The explanation sounds reasonable, sounds exactly like what a conscientious program administrator should say. But Richard mentions the documents Amara showed him, the thick folder with every possible piece of paperwork properly completed and notarized. Henderson's smile tightens just slightly, the corners of his mouth pulling in a way that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Sir, with all due respect, we process 3,000 applications monthly through this program. People claim they submitted paperwork all the time. They swear they turned everything in, but the system doesn't lie. We have tracking, we have protocols, we have verification processes. If the system says documentation was missing, then it was missing." The casual dismissal in his tone, the slight condescension when he says people claim, triggers something in Richard's memory, a similar tone he's heard in country clubs and boardrooms, a particular way certain men talk about those they consider beneath them. Richard asks about category R7, watching Henderson's reaction carefully, and there it is again, that micro-pause, that fraction of a second where Henderson's brain is clearly calculating before he responds. "I'm not familiar with that designation, sir. Might be an old code from before the system update we did last year. Sometimes legacy codes linger in metadata. I can look into it if you'd like." The offer sounds helpful, but Richard notices Henderson hasn't written anything down, hasn't pulled out his phone to make a note, hasn't done any of the things people actually do when they genuinely plan to follow up on something. Richard dismisses him with a nod, and Henderson leaves with that same easy confidence, closing the door softly behind him. But Richard feels deeply unsettled in a way he cannot fully articulate. That evening, sitting in his home office with the city lights of Atlanta sprawling below his penthouse window in Buckhead, Richard calls Shanice Johnson, using the number on Amara's carefully organized paperwork. The phone rings 4 times before a woman answers, her voice weary and tired, the kind of exhaustion that comes not from a long day, but from a long life of fighting battles that never seem to end. Richard introduces himself, and there's a long silence on the other end, so long he thinks she might have hung up, before Shanice speaks again with carefully controlled emotion. She explains everything in detail that matches Amara's account perfectly. She submitted every document required, following the checklist on Meridian's website exactly, even going beyond the requirements to include additional verification. She followed up 6 times over 3 weeks, calling the helpline, sending emails, each time being told her application was still processing and to please be patient. Then suddenly, without warning, she received the denial letter, stating her application was incomplete due to missing documents, a claim that was demonstrably false. She tried to resubmit, gathering everything again, taking time off from her job search to hand-deliver another complete application, only to be told the deadline had passed and no resubmissions were being accepted. The Kafkaesque absurdity of it would be darkly funny if it wasn't destroying her life. The climactic twist comes when Shanice mentions almost casually that she used to work at Meridian Financial in the data entry department 5 years ago, before Richard became CEO, when the company was smaller and less prestigious. She was fired for what the termination letter called performance issues. But the reality was different and darker. She had questioned why certain applications from predominantly black neighborhoods on the south and west sides of Atlanta were being flagged with special codes she didn't understand, codes that seemed to trigger automatic rejections or impossible verification requirements. She noticed patterns in the data she was entering, saw how zip codes correlated with outcomes in ways that had nothing to do with actual qualifications or need. When she tried to report it to Human Resources, bringing printouts and detailed documentation, she was told she was mistaken, that she was seeing patterns that didn't exist, that she was making serious accusations without understanding the complexity of risk assessment algorithms. Within a week, her supervisor began documenting every tiny mistake, every minute she was late, every break that ran 30 seconds long. 2 weeks after her HR complaint, she was fired for accumulating too many performance infractions. She warns Richard now, her voice dropping to something urgent and knowing. Mr. Caldwell, you seem like a decent man. Your reputation suggests you actually care about ethics, about doing right. But you don't know what's happening in your own company, and I'm not sure you're ready to know. And if you start looking, if you start really pulling back the curtain, they'll come for you too. They protect this system because it makes them money, and it keeps people like me in our place. Be careful. The line goes dead before Richard can respond, and when he tries calling back immediately, an automated voice informs him the number has been disconnected. He sits in his home office, surrounded by expensive furniture and prestigious diplomas and photos with powerful people, and realizes he's stumbled onto something terrible, something that's been operating in the shadows of his company, while he focused on quarterly earnings and investor relations and his own ambitions. The city lights below suddenly look different, like they're illuminating not opportunity and prosperity, but something much darker. And for the first time in his privileged life, Richard Caldwell feels the cold touch of real fear. Richard arrives at work the next morning before dawn, the sky over Atlanta still dark and starless, the city quiet in that brief moment before it wakes and roars to life. He uses his executive access to pull raw data from the community aid program, bypassing the standard dashboards and reports to dig into the actual database tables where unfiltered information lives. What he discovers makes his hands shake as he scrolls through row after row of applications, denials, and those mysterious codes that shouldn't exist. He discovers that applications are being sorted by zip codes in the initial processing stage, before any human supposedly even looks at them, And those zip codes are cross-referenced with demographic data that Meridian shouldn't legally be using for these decisions. He pulls up census information and overlays it with the application data, and the pattern emerges with horrifying clarity. Neighborhoods with majority black populations have a 92% denial rate, regardless of income level, regardless of documentation completeness, regardless of actual need. Meanwhile, white neighborhoods with similar or even higher income levels show only an 18% denial rate, their applications sailing through with minimal scrutiny. The statistical impossibility of this being random chance is so obvious that Richard feels nauseous as he prints page after page of evidence. He digs deeper, following data trails through interconnected tables, and finds the category R7 code hidden in metadata fields that don't appear in standard reports, fields that someone deliberately concealed from normal oversight. The code is automatically applied to applications from specific zip codes, and when he maps those codes geographically, they correspond exactly with predominantly black areas. Southwest Atlanta, parts of East Atlanta, College Park, certain neighborhoods in DeKalb County. Once an application receives the R7 flag, it triggers a cascade of automated responses, delays in processing, documentation requests that are purposely vague, lost paperwork that was definitely received, verification calls that are never returned, and ultimately, rejection for bureaucratic reasons that sound legitimate but are entirely manufactured. She's discovered internal emails between board members, using careful corporate language that someone unfamiliar with executive communication might not recognize as sinister, but both Richard and Jennifer know how to read between the lines of business speak. He feels angry at the people who designed this, betrayed by executives he trusted, and ashamed that he could have been so blind, so comfortable in his assumptions that his company operated with integrity because he thought of himself as ethical. He needs to find who designed this system, who approved it, who knew about it, and the investigation leads him to review system architecture documents stored in secure folders that even his executive access requires special authorization to open. The climactic twist hits him like a physical blow when the system architecture shows the discrimination protocol was implemented 3 years ago through a major software update signed off by the entire executive board in a formal vote. Richard pulls up the approval document, expecting to find names he doesn't recognize, maybe lower-level IT managers or consultants he's never met. But what he sees instead stops his heart. His own digital signature appears on the approval document. Right there in the signature block, Richard Caldwell, Chief Executive Officer, approving Community Aid Program System Optimization Initiative. But he has absolutely no memory of approving this. No recollection of any presentation or discussion about these changes. He checks the date. May 15th, 3 years ago, and suddenly he remembers. That was the week his father died after a sudden heart attack. The week Richard missed nearly all his meetings to be with his mother in Savannah. The week his world collapsed into grief and family obligations. He missed a board meeting on May 14th, the day before his father's funeral. Someone used his absence, used his tragedy, to get this discriminatory system approved in his name, forging his signature or using some automated signing protocol when he wasn't physically present. Richard realizes with crystalline clarity that he's been set up, that this conspiracy goes deeper than one rogue employee or even one corrupt department, that the rot extends into the highest levels of Meridian Financial Services. He calls his assistant Jennifer, an Asian-American woman in her early 30s who's been with him for 8 years, who he trusts more than almost anyone in the company, her loyalty and discretion proven through countless confidential matters. She arrives 20 minutes later, letting herself into his office with her key, and immediately sees his face and asks what's wrong with genuine concern in her voice. He shows her everything, spreading printouts across his desk, pulling up databases on his computer, walking her through the demographic analysis, the hidden codes, the forged approval with his signature. Jennifer's expression hardens as she processes the information, her usual professional calm giving way to visible anger. "Mr. Caldwell," she says quietly, "I've heard rumors among the staff." whispers about filtering in various departments, jokes about certain neighborhoods being high risk, in ways that have nothing to do with actual financial metrics. I thought it was just corporate cynicism, the kind of dark humor people use to cope with soul-crushing work. I should have pushed harder, should have questioned more directly, but I convinced myself it was nothing. The guilt in her voice mirrors his own. Together, they begin pulling files on every executive board member, using Jennifer's administrative access combined with Richard's executive privileges to dig through emails, financial records, performance reviews, anything that might reveal who's really running this operation. They work through lunch, Jennifer ordering food that neither of them eats, and through dinner, the office growing dark around them as the sun sets over Atlanta and the building empties of workers heading home to families and lives uncomplicated by the knowledge of systematic oppression they unknowingly facilitate. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Jennifer finds something that changes everything, her sharp intake of breath drawing Richard to her screen. She's discovered internal emails between board members, using careful corporate language that someone unfamiliar with executive communication might not recognize as sinister, but both Richard and Jennifer know how to read between the lines of business speak. The emails reference demographic optimization strategies, risk-appropriate distribution models, and cultural compatibility metrics, all euphemisms for racial discrimination dressed up in the sanitized language of management consulting. The email chain shows this isn't just the community aid program. The discrimination is woven throughout Meridian Financial's operations like cancer through healthy tissue. It's in hiring practices, with certain zip codes flagged for additional screening when applicants apply for jobs. It's in promotions, with employees from non-traditional backgrounds facing cultural fit assessments that white employees never encounter. It's in vendor selection, with minority-owned businesses facing enhanced due diligence that creates impossible barriers. It's even in office assignments, with a coded system ensuring certain employees never make it to client-facing roles or prestigious departments. Meridian Financial Services has been systematically discriminating for years, perhaps decades, operating a shadow system of oppression while publicly celebrating diversity and inclusion, and Richard Caldwell, who prided himself on being a progressive leader, has been the unwitting public face of institutional racism. Richard calls an emergency board meeting for the next morning, using his authority as CEO to require attendance. His email marked urgent with no explanation given. Richard calls an emergency board meeting for the next morning, using his authority as CEO to require attendance. His email marked urgent with no explanation given. Richard's mentor, Thomas Whitmore, a white man of 71 who built Meridian from a regional credit union into a financial services powerhouse over 40 years, sits at the head of the long mahogany table in the boardroom on the 45th floor, his white hair perfectly styled, his suit custom-tailored, his expression mildly curious about this unusual summons. Richard calls an emergency board meeting for the next morning, using his authority as CEO to require attendance. His email marked urgent with no explanation given. Richard presents his findings without preamble and without softening, his voice shaking not with nervousness but with barely contained rage. He displays the demographic analysis on the large screens, shows the denial rates broken down by zip code and race, presents the hidden codes and their systematic application, reveals the forged signature on the approval document from 3 years ago. He demands answers, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turn white. The dismissiveness in his tone, the suggestion that Richard is naive for being upset, triggers something primal in Richard's professional composure. He slams the demographic data on the table, the pages scattering, and his voice rises despite his attempts to control it. This is racial discrimination, Thomas. This is illegal. This is immoral. And it's happening in my company, under my leadership, with my name attached to approvals I never gave. She's discovered internal emails between board members, using careful corporate language that someone unfamiliar with executive communication might not recognize as sinister, but both Richard and Jennifer know how to read between the lines of business speak. And these optimizations you're so upset about have saved Meridian $14 million over the past 3 years by ensuring resources go to populations with lower default risk and higher success probability. The casual admission, the complete lack of shame, stuns Richard into momentary silence. Patricia Hughes adds her perspective with icy precision. Resources are limited, Richard. We can't help everyone. We have to make strategic choices about where to allocate aid, which communities to invest in, which demographics present acceptable risk profiles. Some populations, statistically speaking, show patterns of financial instability that make them poor investments. That's not racism, that's mathematics. The way she says some populations while carefully avoiding explicit racial language tells Richard everything he needs to know about how this evil operates, hiding behind statistics and algorithms and risk models that sound objective but are built on centuries of discrimination. Richard can't believe what he's hearing from people he respected, people he considered mentors and colleagues. You're talking about people, families, children like the 9-year-old girl who showed me her mother's sabotaged application. We denied aid to people who qualified, who needed help desperately, because of the color of their skin. Do you understand what you're describing? This is exactly the kind of institutional racism that civil rights laws were designed to prevent. Thomas stands from his position at the head of the table, walks around to Richard with the slow deliberation of someone who's about to deliver an important lesson, and puts a hand on Richard's shoulder in a gesture that might look friendly to an outside observer, but feels threatening given the context. Son, I've known you since you were a young associate fresh out of Wharton, hungry and brilliant and full of potential. I made you CEO 4 years ago because I believed you had the intelligence and the vision to lead Meridian into the future. But you're young, you're idealistic, and you don't yet understand how business really works in the real world, beyond the ethics courses and the corporate responsibility seminars. The climactic twist comes when Thomas reveals information that makes Richard's blood run cold and his understanding of corporate America fundamentally shift. This system, Thomas explains with the patience of a professor lecturing a slow student, exists in dozens of major corporations across the country. It's an open secret among executives at a certain level, discussed carefully at conferences and private dinners, implemented quietly by consultants who specialize in what they call demographic optimization. There's an entire industry built around this, Thomas continues, pulling out his phone and showing Richard a list that makes him want to vomit. Meridian pays $250,000 annually to a firm called Strategic Demographics Institute, and they're just one client. Thomas scrolls through the SDI client list. Fortune 500 companies, prestigious universities, major banks, insurance companies, healthcare systems, all using similar algorithmic discrimination to filter out populations they deem undesirable while maintaining plausible deniability through layers of technical complexity. This is how the system works, Richard, Thomas says with something almost like sympathy. This is how it's always worked. We just digitized it, made it cleaner and more efficient. In the old days, bank managers would redline neighborhoods with a literal red pen on a map. Now we use algorithms and codes. It's the same result, but legally safer because we never explicitly mention race. We use proxies, zip codes, names, shopping patterns, social networks. The courts can't prove discriminatory intent when it's all just mathematics and machine learning. Richard looks around the table, meeting the eyes of each board member, searching for some sign of discomfort or doubt or shame, but every face is closed, hard, unashamed. These are successful people, wealthy people, people who serve on charity boards and donate to museums and consider themselves pillars of the community, and they're describing a system of racial oppression with the same casual matter-of-factness they'd use to discuss office supply vendors. He realizes with devastating clarity that he's completely alone in this room, that there's no ally among these people he called colleagues, that the power structure he thought he was part of has just revealed itself as something far more sinister than he ever imagined. Richard walks out of the boardroom without another word, ignoring Thomas calling his name in that patient, patronizing tone, ignoring David Brennan's warning that he's making a serious mistake, ignoring Patricia Hughes's cold stare that promises consequences. In the elevator descending from the 45th floor, his phone rings and he sees Jennifer's name on the screen. He answers, and her voice is panicked in a way he's never heard from his normally composed assistant. "They locked me out of the system," she says quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "Security is escorting me out of the building right now. They're clearing my desk, treating me like a criminal. Mr. Caldwell, I tried to save the files we were reviewing last night, but they're destroying the evidence. The entire database we accessed is gone, wiped, like it never existed. They're moving faster than I thought possible." Richard races back to his office on the 42nd floor, his heart pounding, his mind struggling to process how quickly everything is collapsing around him. His computer access is revoked when he tries to log in, his credentials no longer recognized by the system, an error message appearing that suggests he contact IT support for assistance, as if this is some routine technical glitch rather than a deliberate lockout. Security guards appear at his door within minutes, led by a stern white man in his 40s, wearing the dark suit and earpiece of professional corporate security, his face expressionless and entirely unsympathetic. "Mr. Caldwell, the board has requested you take a leave of absence, effective immediately, pending an internal investigation into serious allegations regarding your conduct." The formal language, the careful phrasing, tells Richard they've prepared for this moment, probably have lawyers reviewing every word to ensure legal compliance. He responds with disbelief and rising panic. "You can't do this. I'm the CEO of this company." The security chief's response is delivered with bureaucratic precision. "The board can do anything they want, sir. Your employment contract allows for immediate suspension, with pay pending investigation of conduct violations. The board has invoked that provision. Please collect your personal items. You have 15 minutes. Richard tries to access files from his phone, attempting to download evidence, to save something that might prove what he's discovered, but his phone access is blocked too, his corporate email shut down, his cloud storage locked. He's been completely cut off from Meridian's systems in what must have been a coordinated IT operation planned in advance and executed with ruthless efficiency. "They locked me out of the system," she says quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "Security is escorting me out of the building right now. They're clearing my desk, treating me like a criminal. Mr. Caldwell, I tried to save the files we were reviewing last night, but they're destroying the evidence. The entire database we accessed is gone, wiped, like it never existed. They're moving faster than I thought possible." Richard races back to his office on the 42nd floor, his heart pounding, his mind struggling to process how quickly everything is collapsing around him. His computer access is revoked when he tries to log in, his credentials no longer recognized by the system, an error message appearing that suggests he contact IT support for assistance, as if this is some routine technical glitch rather than a deliberate lockout. "I can't look at myself in the mirror and know I had evidence of systematic racism and did nothing." Richard thanks her with genuine emotion, realizing she just sacrificed her career for principles, that her professional life is probably destroyed just like his, and she made that choice consciously and deliberately. He goes home to his penthouse, the expensive space suddenly feeling like a prison, and tries calling his corporate lawyer. The attorney Meridian pays a substantial retainer to keep on call for executive legal needs. The lawyer, whose office Richard has visited dozens of times for contract reviews and negotiation support, answers with a tone of professional regret. "Richard, I'm sorry, but I have a conflict of interest here. Meridian is my client, and now you have adverse interests to the company. I can't represent you. I'd recommend you find independent counsel." 3 more lawyers Richard calls, attorneys he's known for years through business connections and country club memberships, are all suddenly unavailable, their assistants offering transparent excuses about full caseloads and scheduling conflicts that just happen to coincide with the exact moment Richard needs their help. His personal bank sends an alert that his corporate credit cards are canceled, effective immediately, cutting off access to funds he used for business expenses and personal convenience. An email arrives from the board, carefully worded and obviously drafted by attorneys, informing him that he's on administrative leave, pending investigation into unauthorized data access and potential breach of fiduciary duty to shareholders, language that transforms his discovery of discrimination into criminal-sounding offenses he supposedly committed. They're framing him as the criminal, the person who violated trust and broke rules, rather than the people who designed and operated a racist system. The climactic twist arrives when Richard receives a call from an unknown number, the caller ID showing only private. A voice speaks, digitally altered to sound mechanical and unidentifiable, the kind of voice modulation someone uses when they need anonymity for protection. "Mr. Caldwell, you're in danger. Real danger, not just professional but potentially physical. They're going to destroy you completely. Check your email, the anonymous account you set up last night when you were researching." Richard had created a private Gmail account using a fake name, something he's never done before, acting on instinct that told him he'd need secure communication outside Meridian's systems. He opens that account now on his personal laptop and finds an email from an encrypted address with no identifying information. The email contains documents, PDF files that make his hands shake as he opens them. The documents show the board is planting evidence that Richard embezzled money, creating fake wire transfers and forged invoices showing him siphoning funds into offshore accounts. They're manufacturing emails in his name, approving the demographic optimization system, using sophisticated forgeries that would fool most investigators. They're preparing witness statements from employees who will claim Richard sexually harassed them, creating a pattern of misconduct that will destroy his credibility and reputation. The frame-up is comprehensive, professional, and probably effective. The anonymous caller speaks again, the digitally altered voice carrying unexpected emotion despite the mechanical distortion. "You wanted to expose discrimination, Mr. Caldwell. Now you're experiencing how power crushes those who threaten it. Welcome to what we've lived with forever. This is what it feels like to be powerless, to have the system turn against you, to watch your reputation destroyed by lies while truth doesn't matter. The difference is, for us, this isn't temporary or surprising. It's life." Richard realizes the caller is right, that he's getting just a taste of the systematic oppression he ignored for his entire privileged existence, and the bitter irony burns like acid. His phone rings again, this time showing Thomas Whitmore's name, and Richard answers with trembling hands. Thomas's voice is calm, reasonable, grandfatherly, like he's offering helpful advice rather than delivering threats. "Richard, this can all go away. All of it. The investigation, the allegations, the damage to your reputation. We'll make it disappear like it never happened. Sign a resignation letter citing personal reasons, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, and walk away with your reputation intact and a generous severance package. $10 million, Richard. Tax-free, through carefully structured consulting agreements. You'll never work again at this level, but you'll be comfortable, you'll be safe, or we destroy you. We have lawyers on retainer who cost more per hour than most people make in a month. We have investigators who can manufacture evidence that will convince judges and juries. We have influence with media, with regulators, with prosecutors. You have nothing. You're alone. So take the deal, take the money, and move on with your life." For the first time in his 48 years, Richard Caldwell, who attended the best schools and worked at prestigious firms and rose through corporate ranks on talent and connections, feels genuinely powerless. He hangs up without responding and stares at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, seeing a rich white man who thought his morality mattered more than the system, who believed being right would protect him, who assumed justice would prevail because it always had in his experience. He was wrong about all of it. Richard spends 2 days in his penthouse, watching his carefully constructed life unravel with the methodical efficiency of a controlled demolition. News articles appear in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and on local business websites. Meridian CEO on leave amid investigation. The headlines screaming implications of scandal without making specific accusations, letting readers fill in blanks with their worst assumptions. Anonymous sources, obviously planted by the board, claim he mismanaged funds and created a hostile work environment, that employees feared retaliation if they spoke up about his behavior, that his leadership was erratic and concerning. His friends stopped calling. The people who filled his calendar with golf outings and dinner parties and networking events suddenly unavailable, their assistants offering vague excuses about travel and family commitments. His ex-wife texts him, her message brief and cutting. "Did you really do what they're saying? Think about our daughter. Think about what this does to her." Even the people who should know him, who shared years of his life, believe the lies, or at least find them plausible enough to distance themselves. He feels utterly alone, abandoned by everyone except Jennifer, who emails him once through an encrypted account to say she's okay, but being followed and thinks her phone is tapped. On the third day, there's a knock at his door. Unexpected because the building's doorman usually calls before allowing visitors upstairs. Richard checks the security camera and sees Amara and Shanice Johnson standing in his hallway, the little girl holding her mother's hand, both looking small and out of place in this luxury building. Richard is stunned, opening the door with confusion and wariness. "How did you find me?" Shanice's response is calm and knowing. "I told you I used to work at Meridian. I know things. I know people. I've been tracking this company for 5 years, Mr. Caldwell. Finding your address wasn't difficult." She walks in without waiting for invitation, pulling a rolling briefcase behind her, Amara following quietly. Inside the briefcase are documents, recordings, photographs, organized with the same meticulous care Amara showed with her mother's aid application. Shanice explains while Richard stands in his living room, feeling like reality has shifted again into something unfamiliar. When she was fired 5 years ago, she knew it was retaliation for questioning the discriminatory system she'd witnessed. She spent the following years gathering evidence, working low-wage jobs to survive while dedicating every spare moment to building a case. She identified 12 major corporations using similar discriminatory systems, all clients of Strategic Demographics Institute. She has testimony from 47 people who were denied assistance, jobs, promotions, opportunities because of their race, their stories documented with recordings and affidavits. She's been building a comprehensive case, waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity, the right leverage to make it matter. The climactic twist hits Richard like a physical blow when Shanice reveals she deliberately sent Amara to him that day outside Meridian Tower. It wasn't desperate chance or random luck. She'd researched Richard extensively, reading every interview, every profile piece, tracking his career trajectory. She knew he was relatively new to the CEO position, only 4 years in, still young enough to possibly have ideals not yet completely corrupted. He had a reputation, perhaps unearned but publicly maintained, for ethics and corporate responsibility. He wasn't part of the old guard who built Meridian, wasn't one of Thomas Whitmore's original disciples. He was an outsider, relatively speaking, which made him potentially vulnerable to the truth. She gambled everything on the possibility that if he knew what was really happening, if he saw the evidence directly, he might do something. "I needed someone with access to expose the system from the inside," Shanice says, her voice matter-of-fact. "Someone whose credentials would be believed, whose position gave him access to databases and boardrooms I could never reach. You were my way in, and it worked. You got the evidence we needed. You confirmed everything I suspected about the internal systems." Richard feels manipulated, angry, used like a tool rather than a person. "You used me? You used your daughter? You sent a 9-year-old child to manipulate me?" Shanice's eyes flash with emotion she's clearly been holding back, her composure cracking to reveal rage and pain and exhaustion beneath. "My daughter? Mr. Caldwell, I've been homeless 3 times in the past 5 years. I've had utilities shut off and sat in the dark with Amara doing homework by flashlight. I've skipped meals so she could eat, and she knows it even though I try to hide it. I've worked 3 jobs simultaneously, sleeping 4 hours a night, destroying my body and my health. And you got fired from a position that paid you $800,000 a year, and you're in a penthouse that probably cost more per month than I made all last year. Yes, I used you, because we don't have the luxury of your principles or your moral agonizing. We have to survive. We have to fight with whatever weapons we can find. And you were a weapon I could use." Her words hit Richard like a slap, stripping away any remaining illusions about his own victimhood. He looks at Amara, who meets his eyes steadily, and he sees not a desperate child but a soldier in a war he just realized existed, a 9-year-old girl who's already lived more hardship and struggle than Richard has faced in 48 years of privilege. Shanice continues, her voice softening slightly. "But now they're coming after you. So we have the same enemy. And I have evidence that's been gathering dust for 5 years because I didn't have credibility or resources to make it matter. You have credibility, or at least you had it before they started destroying you, which means you understand now how the system works. Together, we might actually win this thing." Richard asks what she needs, his earlier anger dissolving into grim acceptance that she's right about everything. Shanice lays out her plan. A federal lawsuit against all 12 companies simultaneously. A coordinated legal assault that would be impossible to suppress or settle quietly. Civil rights violations, systematic discrimination, conspiracy to deprive citizens of equal protection under law. But they need a federal prosecutor who can't be bought, who has the institutional backing to withstand the pressure these corporations will bring to bear. Richard knows someone, the name coming to him immediately. Sarah Chen, an assistant United States attorney for the Northern District of Georgia, someone Richard met at a legal conference 3 years ago. She has a reputation for taking on powerful defendants, for not being intimidated by expensive lawyers or political connections. He owes her nothing, and she owes him nothing, which makes her potentially trustworthy in a way his previous contacts proved not to be. But he needs to get the evidence to her without being intercepted, without Meridian or their investigators knowing what he's doing. Marcus, his former driver, appears at the door, having apparently been waiting in the hallway. "Mr. Caldwell, I quit Meridian this morning. Walked out after 23 years. I'm with you, whatever you need. And I know people who can help." Marcus explains he's been driving executives for 2 decades, sitting quietly in the front seat while wealthy white people talked in the back like he was furniture, like he was deaf or stupid or simply didn't matter. He's heard things, learned things, built connections in Atlanta's black community, in churches and civil rights organizations, and networks of people who understand struggle. A coalition is forming, resources mobilizing, and Richard is no longer alone. The board has invoked that provision. Please collect your personal items. You have 15 minutes. Richard tries to access files from his phone, attempting to download evidence, to save something that might prove what he's discovered, but his phone access is blocked too, his corporate email shut down, his cloud storage locked. He's been completely cut off from Meridian's systems in what must have been a coordinated IT operation planned in advance and executed with ruthless efficiency. They organize the evidence into categories: testimony from victims, financial records showing the systematic denial of aid and opportunities, internal emails revealing the discriminatory intent behind supposedly neutral policies, contracts with Strategic Demographics Institute detailing exactly what services they provide. They contact victims one by one, Shanice making introductions, Richard and Jennifer conducting interviews and documenting stories. Each testimony adds another piece to the mosaic of discrimination. A qualified black teacher denied a mortgage despite perfect credit, a black-owned construction company losing contracts due to cultural fit concerns, a black accountant passed over for promotion 23 times, while less qualified white colleagues advanced. Sarah Chen, the federal prosecutor, reviews everything they've compiled, spending 12 hours going through boxes of documents and recordings in a secure location. She confirms it's prosecutable, that they have enough evidence for criminal charges, as well as civil suits, that if they move quickly and coordinate carefully, they can file before Meridian and the other corporations realize what's happening. She'll file in federal court in 3 days, she tells them, and the FBI will execute simultaneous search warrants on all 12 companies. But they need one more piece to make the case truly devastating: direct proof of Strategic Demographics Institute's involvement, evidence that explicitly shows they designed these discriminatory systems. Richard volunteers to get it, knowing he still has connections, still has friends in the business world who might talk if approached correctly. He reaches out to an old friend, Michael Torres, who works at Strategic Demographics Institute as a senior analyst, someone Richard knows from business school at Wharton, someone he's stayed in touch with over the years. They meet at a coffee shop in Decatur, deliberately choosing a public location that's not near Meridian Tower or anywhere Richard is known. Michael is nervous, looking around constantly, his hands shaking slightly as he stirs sugar into coffee he doesn't drink. He confirms everything Shanice suspected and more. Strategic Demographics Institute designs these discriminatory systems for dozens of corporations, insurance companies, universities, healthcare systems. It's legal, technically, because the algorithms never explicitly mention race. They use proxies, zip codes, names that statistically correlate with certain ethnic groups, shopping patterns, social networks, educational institutions. The algorithms are sophisticated enough to pass legal scrutiny because they can point to seemingly neutral factors while achieving discriminatory outcomes with 95% accuracy. Everyone in the industry knows what it really is. Michael admits with visible shame. They call it optimization and risk adjustment and demographic targeting, but they know they're building tools of oppression. Michael refuses to testify, though, his voice breaking as he explains he has a family, a mortgage, student loans, still from business school. If he turns whistleblower, he'll never work in finance again, and he doesn't have Richard's savings or connections to fall back on. Richard understands, doesn't push, thanks him for the honesty. As Richard leaves the coffee shop, a black SUV pulls up to the curb with the aggressive certainty of people who don't need permission. Men in suits emerge, not police but private security, the expensive kind that corporations hire when they need deniability. They grab Richard, not violently enough to attract intervention from witnesses, but firmly enough to make resistance pointless, and force him into the vehicle. He's driven to a warehouse on the outskirts of Atlanta, the kind of anonymous industrial space that dots every American city, and the climactic twist reveals the true extent of what he's fighting. Thomas Whitmore is waiting inside the warehouse, along with expensive lawyers in $1,000 suits, David Brennan looking coldly satisfied, Patricia Hughes checking her phone with bored impatience, and two men Richard doesn't recognize, but who radiate the particular menace of people accustomed to operating outside legal constraints. Thomas speaks with the disappointed tone of a parent whose child has refused to listen to wisdom. "I hoped you'd be reasonable, Richard. I really did. But you've forced our hand, and now we have to protect Meridian and our partners from your reckless crusade." They show him evidence they've manufactured over the past week, working with the efficiency of well-funded conspiracy. Falsified embezzlement records showing Richard transferred $3.7 million to accounts in the Cayman Islands over the past 2 years. Fake witnesses, employees who will testify that Richard sexually harassed them, with detailed statements and manufactured text messages and emails. A planted paper trail showing Richard personally designed the discriminatory system, with forged documents and falsified meeting notes and fabricated communications. "We'll destroy you so thoroughly, Richard, that no one will believe anything you say. Your evidence will be dismissed as the desperate fabrications of a disgraced executive trying to deflect blame. We'll prosecute you for embezzlement, for fraud, for sexual misconduct. We'll bankrupt you with legal fees, even if you somehow avoid conviction, and we'll ensure you never work again, anywhere, in any capacity." They offer one final deal. Sign over all evidence he's collected, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prevents him from ever discussing Meridian or its practices, and leave the country for 2 years with $10 million to rebuild his life somewhere else, somewhere his disgrace won't follow him. Or they'll prosecute him, destroy him, and ensure he spends the next decade fighting criminal charges from a position of complete powerlessness. One of the unknown men speaks, his voice casual in a way that makes the threat more terrifying. "And that's just what we'll do to you, Mr. Caldwell. Imagine what we'll do to Miss Johnson. Single mother, history of unemployment, living in subsidized housing. Easy to make her look unstable, neglectful, unfit. Child Protective Services can be very aggressive when they receive credible reports of child endangerment. And your former assistant, young woman, immigrant parents, here on work visa. Immigration issues can be complicated. And your driver, black man with a son who just got into Georgia Tech on scholarship. Scholarships can be revoked for all sorts of reasons. The threats are clear, vicious, and entirely credible. Richard realizes with sickening clarity that he's not just fighting a corporation or even a network of corporations. He's fighting a system with unlimited resources, with connections to law enforcement and immigration and child services, with absolutely no conscience or restraint. They give him 24 hours to decide, and Richard is released on a dark street in an industrial area, alone and shaking. He calls Shanice from a burner phone Marcus gave him, his voice breaking as he explains the threats. "We have to stop. They're going to hurt people. They're going to hurt Amara. I can't let that happen." Shanice's response is quiet but firm, carrying the weight of lifelong struggle. "Mr. Caldwell, they've been hurting us our whole lives. The only difference is you just noticed. But I understand. You have to make your own choice. We'll keep fighting, with or without you." Richard returns to the penthouse feeling defeated, hollowed out, carrying the weight of impossible choices. Everyone is there waiting: Shanice, Amara, Marcus, Jennifer, and Sarah Chen. Richard explains the threats in detail, his voice flat and exhausted. Jennifer breaks down crying, terrified for her parents who immigrated from Taiwan with nothing and built a life she's now afraid will be destroyed because she chose principle over safety. Marcus's jaw clenches, decades of controlled anger visible in his expression. Sarah Chen says legally she can offer some protection through federal marshals and witness protection protocols, but it's limited, and these corporations have resources to work around official protections. Richard wants to take the deal, wants to protect everyone, wants to stop this nightmare before more people get hurt. The climactic twist comes from an unexpected source when Amara stands up and speaks for the first time in hours, her 9-year-old voice cutting through the adult despair with painful clarity. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm 9 years old. I've watched my mama cry herself to sleep because she couldn't pay rent, her body shaking with silent sobs she thought I couldn't hear. I've eaten cereal for dinner for weeks at a time, the cheap store brand that gets soggy immediately, and pretended it was a treat because I knew we couldn't afford anything else. I've worn the same shoes with holes in them for 2 years, stuffing cardboard inside to cover the gaps, and kids at school laughed at me. I've heard people call her lazy, stupid, undeserving, people who've never worked half as hard as she does every single day. I've seen her denied and denied and denied, just because of how we look, because of where we live, because the system decided we don't matter." Her voice doesn't waver, and every adult in the room is frozen, listening to this child articulate truths they've been dancing around. "You can stop now, Mr. Caldwell. Take your money. Protect yourself. Go somewhere safe. But we can't stop. This is our life. Every day. Forever. Unless someone fights. Unless someone says no, this is wrong. This has to change. If you stop now, it's okay. You tried more than most people ever do. But we're going to keep fighting because we don't have any other choice." The room is silent except for Jennifer's quiet crying. Richard looks at this 9-year-old girl carrying the weight of generations on her small shoulders, and he thinks about his own daughter from his previous marriage, who's 12, and goes to an exclusive private school where tuition costs $40,000 a year. His daughter worries about which summer camp to attend and whether she'll make the varsity soccer team and which college will accept her in 6 years. She lives in a world of pure possibility, where her biggest concern is which privilege to pursue. Amara worries about food and housing and whether her mother will be okay. His daughter has never questioned whether the system is fair, because it's always worked for her. Amara understands systematic oppression at 9 years old because she's lived it every day of her life. He realizes the fundamental difference. His daughter has the luxury of innocence that children should have, the ability to be a child. Amara never did, and millions of black children never do, forced to understand adult realities of racism and discrimination while they're still learning to read. Richard makes his decision, the words coming out clear and firm. "We file. Tomorrow. All of it. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, everything we have. And I'll testify publicly about the threats, about the manufactured evidence, about everything they're trying to do. If they're going to destroy me anyway, I'm going down fighting, and I'm taking them with me." Sarah Chen nods, her expression showing grim satisfaction. "The evidence is solid. We have testimony from 47 victims, internal documents from multiple corporations, communications showing coordination between companies, contracts with Strategic Demographics Institute proving they designed these systems. We'll file simultaneously in federal court and with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I'm also notifying the FBI's Civil Rights Division and the Department of Justice. This is big enough that multiple agencies will want jurisdiction. They work through the night, finalizing documents, organizing exhibits, preparing testimony, running on coffee and adrenaline, and the desperate hope that justice might actually prevail. At dawn, they drive in 3 separate cars to the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, taking circuitous routes to avoid potential surveillance. The filing is submitted at 8:23 in the morning, hand-delivered to the court clerk who accepts the boxes of evidence with bureaucratic efficiency. I've seen her denied and denied and denied, just because of how we look, because of where we live, because the system decided we don't matter. Her voice doesn't waver, and every adult in the room is frozen, listening to this child articulate truths they've been dancing around. You can stop now, Mr. Caldwell. Take your money. Protect yourself. Go somewhere safe. But we can't stop. This is our life. Every day. Forever. Unless someone fights. By noon, Thomas Whitmore is giving a press conference at Meridian Tower, standing before a podium with the company logo, his expression grave and offended. He denies everything with the smooth confidence of someone who's lied successfully for decades, calling Richard a disgruntled former employee making false accusations, suggesting mental health issues and personal vendettas, promising Meridian will vigorously defend itself against these baseless claims. Richard watches from Sarah Chen's office, and his phone rings showing an unknown number. Thomas's voice is cold, no more pretense of mentorship or paternal concern. You've made the biggest mistake of your life, Richard. You have no idea what's coming. We will destroy you so completely that you'll wish you'd taken the deal. Your name will be synonymous with fraud and disgrace. Your daughter will grow up ashamed of you. You'll die alone and broken, and Meridian will still be standing. Richard responds with something he didn't know he possessed, absolute certainty in his choice. For the first time in my life, Thomas, I'm on the right side of something. I'm fighting for people instead of profits. That's worth more than anything you can take from me, and I'll see you in court. He hangs up, and there's a moment of collective breath-holding before the reality settles. Outside the courthouse, media swarms like sharks sensing blood, cameras and microphones, creating a gauntlet they'll have to walk through. Shanice, Marcus, Jennifer, and Richard stand together, Amara holding her mother's hand, and they walk out into the bright November sunlight. Richard gives a statement to the assembled press, his voice clear and steady despite everything. Today we're exposing a system of racial discrimination that has operated in the shadows of American business for decades. We're fighting not just for justice in this specific case, but for the simple idea that everyone deserves fair treatment, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of where they live, regardless of their last name or their zip code. These corporations have used algorithms and codes to hide old-fashioned racism behind new-fashioned technology. But discrimination is discrimination, whether it's done with a red pen or a computer program. And today, we're saying no more. Cameras flash, reporters shout questions, and the war has truly begun. 6 months later, after depositions and motions and countless legal battles, the trial concludes on a humid Atlanta afternoon. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable even by the expensive lawyers Meridian and the other corporations deployed. Meridian Financial and 8 other corporations settle for a combined $340 million, rather than face jury verdicts that could be even larger. 4 companies refuse to settle and go to trial, gambling that juries won't believe systematic discrimination exists in modern corporate America, and they lose catastrophically, with juries awarding punitive damages that send stock prices plummeting. Strategic Demographics Institute is shut down by federal order, its algorithms deemed unlawful instruments of discrimination. Thomas Whitmore, David Brennan, and Patricia Hughes face criminal charges for conspiracy and civil rights violations, their perp walks broadcast on national news. Richard testifies for 3 days, his credibility battered by the manufactured evidence and smear campaigns, but ultimately holding because the documentary proof is simply too strong to dismiss. But victory tastes hollow and complicated in ways Richard didn't anticipate. He's jobless, blacklisted from every major corporation, his reputation permanently damaged by the coordinated campaign Meridian waged against him. No Fortune 500 company will touch him, and even nonprofits worry about the controversy he brings. His savings dwindle, paying lawyers for his own defense against the embezzlement charges that were eventually dropped but cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to fight. His ex-wife wins full custody of their daughter, the judge accepting her argument that Richard's recklessness and inability to maintain stable employment makes him an unsuitable primary parent. He loses his penthouse when he can't make the mortgage payments, moving to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta, the kind of neighborhood he used to drive through without noticing. On a cold November morning, 1 year after Amara first stopped him beside his Bentley, Richard sits in a donated office space that now serves as headquarters for the Fair Access Coalition, a nonprofit organization he started with Marcus and Jennifer. They help victims of corporate discrimination navigate legal systems, connect people with pro bono lawyers, document cases of systematic bias, and advocate for policy changes. The work is meaningful and exhausting, running on grants and donations that are never quite enough. Money is constantly tight, and Richard works longer hours for no salary than he ever did as a highly paid executive. A knock at the door interrupts his review of another discrimination case, and Shanice enters with Amara beside her. They're both dressed professionally, Shanice wearing a tailored suit Richard has never seen her in before, Amara in a school uniform from a private academy. Shanice wears a confident smile Richard hasn't seen before, the perpetual exhaustion gone from her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, we have news." She places a folder on his desk, and inside is a job offer printed on official letterhead. Chief Ethics Officer at the Southern Coalition for Civil Rights, one of the most respected organizations fighting discrimination in America. Salary $200,000 annually, with full benefits, housing allowance, comprehensive legal protection for him and his work. They want someone who understands corporate corruption from the inside out, Shanice explains. Someone who sacrificed everything to do the right thing, who knows how these systems work and how to dismantle them. Someone who has credibility with business leaders but loyalty to justice. "You're uniquely qualified." Richard stares at the offer, emotions overwhelming him, unable to speak for a moment. Amara speaks with the same directness she showed a year ago. "Mama got a job too. Community Outreach Director at the Fair Housing Alliance. We have an apartment now, a real apartment, with 2 bedrooms in a safe neighborhood. I have my own room for the first time ever, and it has a window that gets morning Sunday." Shanice's eyes glisten with emotion she's allowing herself to show. The settlement money went to 3,000 families who were denied aid or opportunities. We were one of them. We're okay now, Mr. Caldwell. We're actually okay, and it's because you chose to fight even when it destroyed your comfortable life. Richard feels tears coming and doesn't fight them back this time. Then Shanice pulls out another document, this one stamped with FBI confidential markings, and the final revelation clicks into place. "Remember I said I'd been gathering evidence for 5 years? I wasn't just a fired data entry clerk with a grudge. I was working with the FBI as a confidential informant since I left Meridian. They recruited me when I first tried reporting the discrimination, when HR shut me down. They needed someone who understood the system from inside, who could document everything systematically. When I got fired, they helped me build the case from outside, connected me with other victims, taught me how to gather evidence that would hold up in court." Richard's jaw drops, the entire past year reframing itself. "You were FBI this whole time?" Shanice smiles with something like mischief. "I was a victim who became a witness, who became an agent of change. And you, Mr. Caldwell, you were the catalyst we needed." The FBI couldn't act without concrete evidence from someone with executive access, someone whose testimony would be believed. We'd been building the case for years, but we needed someone inside to open the databases, to confirm what we suspected, to provide the documentation that only a CEO could access. You provided that, and more. You chose to keep fighting even when it cost you everything. The final twist settles over Richard like sunlight breaking through clouds. Amara stopping him that day wasn't just desperate strategy or even calculated manipulation. It was the culmination of a 5-year federal investigation, a carefully planned operation that needed his specific position and access. The desperate child, the manipulated CEO, the dramatic confrontation, the threats and consequences, all pieces moving toward justice in ways he never understood while he was living through them. "We used you," Shanice admits, with complete honesty. "But you chose to be used for something bigger than yourself. And that choice, that moment when you decided justice mattered more than comfort, that's what made the difference. You could have taken the money and walked away. Most people in your position would have, but you didn't." Richard looks at these two remarkable people, this mother and daughter who brought down an empire of discrimination through patience and courage and strategic brilliance. "I thought I was saving you," he says quietly. "No," Shanice responds gently. "We saved each other. You lost your privilege, your comfort, your position. You got a real taste of what it's like to be powerless, to have systems turn against you, to watch everything you built disappear because you threatened people with power. And you kept fighting anyway. That's when you became real to me. When you stopped being a useful tool and became an actual ally." Amara adds, her voice carrying wisdom that should take decades to acquire, but was forced upon her by circumstances she didn't choose. "My teacher says heroes aren't people who have power and use it to help the weak. Heroes are people who give up power to do what's right, who sacrifice safety for justice. You lost everything, Mr. Caldwell. That makes you a real hero." Richard finally lets himself smile, a genuine expression of something like peace. He lost everything he thought mattered, the penthouse and the prestige and the position. He lost his marriage and his comfortable relationship with his daughter and his place in Atlanta's business elite. But sitting in this small donated office, with these two extraordinary people, doing work that actually helps vulnerable communities instead of exploiting them, he's found something his money and status never gave him. Purpose, real purpose that goes beyond quarterly earnings and shareholder value. Outside, Atlanta moves forward, slightly better than it was a year ago, but still deeply flawed, still carrying the weight of centuries of discrimination and inequality. The system is wounded, not defeated, scarred, but not destroyed. The 12 corporations paid settlements but still operate, their stock prices recovered, their executives mostly unpunished beyond a few high-profile scapegoats. Strategic Demographics Institute shut down, but 3 similar firms have already emerged, offering the same services under different names. Thomas Whitmore awaits trial but remains free on bail, living in his mansion, confident his lawyers will find technical grounds for dismissal. The work continues, endless and exhausting and necessary. But today, in this moment, justice won a battle, if not the war. 3,000 families received compensation. Hundreds of victims had their stories heard and validated. Corporate America received notice that discrimination has consequences. And Richard Caldwell found redemption not through comfort or wealth, but through sacrifice and solidarity. Amara grins, the expression transforming her face from serious warrior to actual 9-year-old child. "So, Mr. Caldwell, you ready to keep fighting?" Richard stands, extends his hand first to Amara and then to Shanice, feeling the weight of commitment settle comfortably on his shoulders. "Let's go to work." The fight against systematic racism and discrimination didn't end with one lawsuit or one victory. It continues every day in courtrooms and boardrooms and community centers across America. But people like Richard and Shanice and Marcus and Jennifer and Amara, people who choose justice over comfort, who sacrifice security for principle, who refuse to accept that this is just how things are, they're the ones who move the needle forward, inch by painful inch, toward a more equitable world. Richard accepts the job offer, and 6 weeks later he's working at the Southern Coalition for Civil Rights, using his insider knowledge of corporate systems to identify and dismantle discrimination wherever it hides. The Fair Access Coalition continues with new leadership, expanding its reach to help more victims. Shanice becomes a nationally recognized advocate, testifying before Congress about systematic discrimination in housing and finance. Marcus starts a consulting firm teaching corporations how to actually implement equitable practices instead of just performing diversity. Jennifer goes to law school, determined to fight these battles with legal credentials. And Amara, she gets to be a kid for a while, studying and playing and dreaming about futures that actually seem possible now. The story that started with a desperate child stopping a wealthy CEO beside his Bentley became a story about transformation and sacrifice and the hard work of justice. It became proof that change is possible, that individuals can fight systems and sometimes win, that comfort and complicity can be exchanged for purpose and solidarity. It's not a fairy tale with perfect endings, but it's real, and real change never comes easy or clean. It comes through people making hard choices, accepting consequences, and refusing to give up even when the system tells them they've already lost. What about you? Have you ever witnessed discrimination in your workplace, your community, or your own life? Have you ever had to choose between staying silent and staying comfortable, or speaking up and facing consequences? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think about systematic injustice differently, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more stories that matter. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination operates in modern America, hiding behind algorithms and policies while destroying real lives. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for caring enough about justice to spend time with this difficult story. Together, we can build a world where children like Amara don't have to become warriors before they become adults, where fairness isn't a privilege but a right, where the system works for everyone regardless of the color of their skin. Keep fighting for what's right, even when it costs you everything, because that's how we change the world, one choice at a time.